Hey guys, welcome to the car vlog. Today I want to talk about what development is really about. You see, a lot of nerds, when they think of development, they're just thinking about writing code. They think about implementing a framework, but that's really just part of the equation. Some of you nerds are going, what do you mean? How could coding and frameworks just be part of the equation? Isn't that just development? No. Development has a lot to do with interacting with the client, gathering requirements, figuring out what they want, figuring out exactly the type of system that they need. There's a lot of back and forth and communication with the client. That's why I emphasize, before you learn a new framework, it's better that you develop better communication skills, written and verbal, and listening. One of the highest paying jobs in development is that person who communicates between the client and the nerds. That bridge, that guy who can speak nerd, the developer, who can also speak to people and figure out exactly what the client wants or needs for their particular project. A lot of times, you're going to have to figure that one out because the client won't really know until they actually see it. This is something I've seen over and over and over again. So you have to figure that out. So let me give you a couple quick tips on how to quickly assess exactly what you need to put into a project. One of the things I suggest when it comes to web apps is that the first thing that you do is you put together the screens, the views, as nerds will call them, views, screens, basically the user interface. That's the first thing I would put together, because by putting together the user interface, mocking it up, it allows you to show this to your client and say, okay, now does this have what you need? Is there anything missing here? And only then you're going to start getting an accurate picture about what the project should have, because everything in the views are going to reflect the data that you're manipulating in the back end, right? Because for anything to go into the database or out of the database, it's got to go through the views as well. It's got to go through those forms, etc. Now, I mentioned databases because the vast majority of development, web app development anyway, has to do with saving data. If you really think about most web apps. You're collecting information, data, and then you're storing that information, and then you're massaging it along the way, verifying that it's accurate, this and that and the other thing. So that's why I say when you first sit down with a client, sketch out the views, sketch out the various pages, still on pen and paper if you would like, or notepads, digital notepads, whatever method is better for you. And then I would quickly mock it up in code, very rough, use a good an IDE or a good visual editor that will allow you to easily throw together user interfaces. Again, the most important thing is that you got to get the views in the front of the faces of your clients. Now, before you even do the views, you got to do a quick bullet point summary of what the app is going to do for the client. You could sit down, talk to them about that. List the various screens that they want to see. So we'll put it in the example of the web for just to make it easy. So you have a bunch of web pages. You have the shopping cart page, the contact page, the product details page, the login page, etc., etc. And then you list in bullet points what has to appear on that page in terms of user interface components. Like on the login page, you have a form field for first name and user ID and password, etc. Forgot password functionality. Click here to retrieve my password. Maybe you have a function where you want to give the users the ability to see the password that they're typing in, because normally when you have a password field, it stars it out so you can't see. That could be annoying sometimes, especially with complex passwords. You got nobody looking over your shoulder, so you should be able to have the ability to just click a button so you can see the password that you're typing out. Like, it's something we implemented in Studio Web 4 as an example. Stuff like that. And you can see, think about it, by just going over the screens and thinking about what elements have to be there, it's telling you a lot about the internals of the application that you're building. Now, I'm using the web as an example of this, but this easily applies to iOS and Android-based development as well, or thick clients as well. Where this falls apart, of course, you got no screens if you're writing server automation scripts and so forth. But again, there, you just skip the screen part because if you're automating a server processes, you just, you sit down with the client and you outline what processes have to be done, et cetera, et cetera. Again, short intro, paragraph, bullet point, next section, short intro, paragraph, bullet point. You want to iterate quickly in the early stages of any app's development because, again, clients typically don't know exactly what they want until they see it in front of them. So you just got to get it out there as quickly as possible. Don't spend too much time, my advice, trying to nail down and hammer down every single element perfectly because they may have in their mind's eye what it is that they want to see, and then when they actually see the real thing in front of them, they're going to change their ideas. So just get it out there as quickly as possible. So to wrap it all up, yes, development has, of course, tons of writing code, tons of framework use, database design, but at the same time, there's a lot of work in terms of assessing projects, dealing with clients, figuring out what their requirements are. That's such an important part of the process. And to reiterate, that is why I say to people, once you know your foundations and you have your core technology stack in place in terms of your skill set, so then what you should do at that point is you should then work on communication skills. Now, when we just finish with this, when I talk about your core skill set, so let's say you're doing the web stack, so you have to learn HTML5, CSS3, your JavaScript, then you probably, if you're doing full stack or back end, you should learn at least, you got to learn some programming language on the back end. It could be PHP, it could be Python, it could be Java, it could be Ruby, whatever your preference is. And I've gone into this in the past. And then you have to, you're going to learn some frameworks. So if you're doing Ruby, it would probably be Rails. If you're doing PHP, it would probably be Laravel. If you're doing Python, it would probably be Django, maybe Flask. Java, you'd be doing Spring. Once you have that, instead of trying to learn another framework, maybe I should learn Angular, or maybe I should learn React, or maybe I should learn Flutter if I want to do mobile, etc. Instead of putting your time into that, then I would put my time into better communication skills, soft skills, so you can extract that information from your clients so you can figure out what the requirements are. If you do that, you're going to move much more quickly ahead in your career, no question. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't learn another framework, of course, but communication skills are more important. All right, I hope this is useful. Ciao.